I'm summarizing all of One Piece arc by arc so you don't have to watch 1,100 episodes of peak fiction. Welcome back to Calvary's Cave, and more importantly, to another episode of One Piece Wednesdays. On today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the Little Garden arc. So without any further ado, why don't we just get into it? Back out on the open seas, we can already see the Straw Hats starting to bond more as a crew. Everyone's growing closer to Vivi, and even Karu is settling in nicely with the group. Vivi does seem a little bit bothered by how chaotic and carefree everyone acts on the ship, but Nami steps in and basically tells her that it's okay to let her worries melt away while she's with them. That little moment does a lot to show how the crew is already making space for her. There's a weird, pretty much unimportant scene with a giant dolphin, and right after that, they spot their next island. This is the second island the Straw Hats hit in the Grand Line, and it's almost completely uncharted and overgrown. The name Little Garden feels like a joke the second they get close, because everything on this island is massive. It's a giant jungle filled with huge, menacing looking beasts. Most of the crew immediately agrees that they don't want to stay here long, but of course, Luffy can smell adventure, and oddly enough, Vivi wants to tag along too. Poor Karu gets volunteered in the process. Just like that, Luffy, Vivi, and Karu head onto the island. Zoro and Sanji also leave the ship and turn it into a competition, challenging each other to see who can bring back the bigger catch. Meanwhile, Nami and Usopp stay behind on the Going Merry, clearly too nervous to step foot on the island. As the others explore, Nami starts thinking that she's read about this place before, and she immediately goes looking for a book. At the same time, Luffy and Vivi run into actual dinosaurs, which leads them to realize this is basically a prehistoric island. Vivi explains that because travel on the Grand Line is so difficult, a lot of these islands have been isolated for so long that each one developed completely differently. Some became advanced, while others stayed frozen in time for thousands of years. The unstable climate of the Grand Line makes that kind of isolation possible. Little Garden is one of those places stuck in the past. Right after that, Nami finally finds the books that she was looking for, but it's already too late. A giant shadow approaches in the distance. She drops the book out of fear, and we get a clear look at the title, Bragman. The passage says that to its inhabitants, this island truly is a little garden, and so it was named Little Garden, Land of the Giants, written by the explorer Louis Arnott. Now, why am I pointing this out? This is such a small detail. It shows up on one panel of one page of one chapter, that chapter being chapter 115, and then it basically disappears. But that name, Louis Arnott, actually appears in the current story of One Piece almost 1,000 chapters later. The fact that Oda planted something so minor this early into the story, only for it to matter so far down the line, still just blows my mind. Drop a W Oda in the comments. Both Zoro and Sanji have already found some massive creatures for their hunting challenge. Meanwhile, back on the ship, Nami and Usopp are staring at an actual giant. His name is Brogy, and the first thing that he does is ask the Straw Hats if they have any ale. Before they can even process what's happening, a dinosaur bites him, and he casually just takes it out like it's nothing. Then he bellows at the top of his lungs, "Behold, the mightiest warrior of Elbaf, Brogy." This is also where One Piece starts unleashing some of the more unhinged character laughs. If you've been watching the anime, then you know what I'm talking about, Brogy being the first with a very interesting laugh. Feel free to drop a comment and let me know what your favorite laugh is. Usopp, Nami, and Vivi are understandably terrified, but there's no time to dwell on it, because Luffy has managed to climb on top of a dinosaur and then immediately get swallowed by one. Vivi and Karu are left stunned until another giant shows up and frees Luffy from the situation. This is where we meet Dory. Luffy, being Luffy, immediately asks if he's human. Dory also has his own strange laugh and introduces himself the exact same way that Brogy did, as the mightiest warrior of Elbaf. Vivi recognizes that they're giants. She'd heard of them before, but never actually seen one. Dory turns out to be surprisingly friendly and invites them back to his place. At the same time, we cut over to Usopp and Nami, who are now at Brogy's home. He's also being hospitable, but given the size difference and the situation, both of them are convinced that he's just fattening them up to eat them later. Nami asks the important question: how long does it take for the log post to reset on this island? Brogy tells them that it takes a full year. So yeah, the Straw Hats better get comfortable. Back at Dory's place, place, Luffy and the giant are already bonding over food. Luffy asks where he comes from, and Dory explains that he's from Elbaf, a village of warriors somewhere else on the Grand Line. Back home, they live by a strict code. When two people have a dispute and neither side will back down, they leave it to the god of Elbaf to decide. Their god protects the one who's right and lets him live. A long time ago, Dory started some trouble, and now he's stuck on the islands fighting another warrior. Whoever is right will win and survive. The problem is, they've already been fighting for 100 years, and nothing has been settled. Dory mentions that the signal for their combat is the eruption of the volcano at the center of the island. Vivi tries to ask what the original dispute was even about, but Luffy doesn't care. To him, this is a matter of honor. Right on cue, both Dory and Brogy hear the signal and immediately charge at each other. The reason they even started fighting has been long forgotten. Their clash is so massive and overwhelming that even Luffy is left on the ground, realizing just how far out of his depth this fight is. We then cut over to an island called Kukur on the Grand Line, where we get our first look at Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week. They've just received orders from the boss, along with a note saying that Mr. 5 has been taken out, and it's now their turn to deal with the Straw Hats. Back on Little Garden, Dory and Brogy are still going at it. Usopp and Luffy watch the fight in complete awe, while Nami is significantly less interested. But for Usopp, this battle hits different. He's watching a glorious fight to the death between two real warriors, and something clicks. This is what he wants. He wants to become a brave warrior of the sea. He wants that same kind of honor. He even says that if there's an entire village of warriors like them out there, he wants to go there someday. The fight ends in another draw. That makes 73,466 draws total. Afterward, the two giants share a laugh and casually mention the guests staying on each of their sides of the island. Dory heads back to his place and talks with Luffy and Vivi again. Vivi understands how serious their situation is and asks if there's any other way off the island. That's when Dory brings up eternal poses. The only one that he has is set to his homeland of Elbaf, and he and Brogy are currently fighting over it. Luffy makes it clear they don't need to go to Alabasta right now, they just need to reach the next island. Dory also mentions that the only other way that they could probably get there would be by pure luck. Over on Brogy's side, Usopp tells him that he wants to be like the warriors of Elbaf. He wants honor and glory. Brogy explains that for the warriors of Elbaf, if they can die with honor, even their deaths can become glorious. That honor becomes the eternal treasure of their homeland. Usopp takes that in and quietly realizes that honor itself is a kind of treasure. Before he can sit with that thought for long enough, we cut back to Dory's side, and the ale that he just drank suddenly explodes. The Straw Hats know that it didn't come from their crew. Vivi immediately wonders out loud if the other giant might have put explosives in the drink, but Luffy shuts that idea down. Anyone who's been fighting for 100 years over honor wouldn't pull a dirty trick like that. Dory is badly hurt, but he wants answers. He knows Brogy wouldn't do this. In his mind, that leaves Luffy as the only other possibility. Luffy understands in that moment that running isn't an option. The only thing left to do is face it head on, and that leads to an all-out battle between Luffy and Dory. After a brief but intense fight, Luffy comes out on top. Even after winning, he's still furious. Somebody spiked that ale. He knows it wasn't the other giant. And he knows none of the Straw Hats would ever pull a cheap trick like that. That only leaves one conclusion. There is somebody else on this island. We cut over to a strange wax structure sitting in the middle of the jungle. And whatever this wax is made out of is incredibly tough. A dinosaur tries to bite into it and ends up breaking its own teeth. And this simple moment serves as the reintroduction of Miss Valentine and Mr. 5, who are also on Little Garden. They step inside of the wax structure, and we see that Miss Golden Week and Mr. 3 are already there. It's immediately clear that Mr. 3's pair isn't exactly fond of Mr. 5's team. Before things can get too heated, Mr. 3 points out that this is actually a perfect opportunity. They can make a huge score on this island without even having to do most of the dirty work themselves. That's when he pulls out a pair of bounty posters for Dory and Brogy. These posters are 100 years old. A long time ago, there was a crew of giant pirates who tore across the seas. They were known as the Giant Warrior Pirates, and their captains were two legendary monsters, Dory the Blue Ogre and Brogy the Red Ogre. And both of them are still alive on this island, each worth 100 million berries. Mr. 3 lays it out clearly. If they finish their original mission and bring in an extra 200 million berries and bounties, a promotion is basically guaranteed. We also finally get confirmation that the exploding ale was Mr. 5's doing. This is where we start getting a much clearer picture of who Mr. 3 actually is. He's a strategist, a tactician, someone who actually uses his head and a bit of creativity instead of just charging in. Just then, the volcano erupts again, and even though Dory is in rough shape, he still forces himself to continue the fight. While all of that is happening, Nami realizes that they're in a pretty bad spot. They're not equipped to make it back to the ship safely on their own, so she comes up with a plan. Regroup with Luffy at Dory's place and figure things out from there. Over at Dory's side, things take a turn. Dory lifts the giant skull on the island and plants it on top of Luffy so he can't run. He explains that 100 years ago, he was the one who started this fight. If he didn't show up now, it would tarnish his name as a warrior. And to lose his name would be to lose himself. He does apologize for suspecting Luffy's crew, but he still stands by the code. This is the judgment of Elbaf, the god of war. Divine protection simply wasn't with him on this day. Luffy is clearly frustrated by that line of thinking. Dory argues that Luffy and his crew have only lived for 10 or 20 years. They couldn't possibly understand the sacred words of Elbaf, and with that, Dory and Brogy prepare to resume their fight. As Luffy sits there trying to figure out who actually spiked the ale, Vivi notices that Karu is missing. We cut back to Mr. 3's group. Their first target is Dory the Blue Ogre. Mr. 3 is carrying sketches of all the Straw Hats drawn by the Unluckies, and he's fully planning to take every single one of them down. Meanwhile, Zoro is dragging his catch back towards the ship when he runs into what he thinks is Nami. But this version of Nami is just sitting there, completely still, not responding at all. At the same time, the real Nami is running through the forest with Usopp, trying not to get eaten by a dinosaur. That's when she comes across a completely still Luffy standing in the middle of the jungle, also saying nothing. In the chaos, Nami and Usopp get separated. Usopp eventually reunites with Luffy and Vivi, convinced that a dinosaur must have eaten Nami. Both he and Luffy start panicking, but Vivi points out that something feels off. She can't be sure, but what if Baroque Works agents followed them all the way to this island? Between the two of them, Nami would be the more valuable target, since Usopp probably isn't even on their hit list yet. Usopp also learns that Dory is in bad shape, and while the giants are still fighting, we see that Mr. 3 has already started meddling in their battle, leaving Brogy as the victor. Luffy is furious when he sees that Dory has lost the battle. Meanwhile, Mr. 3 is over on the other side, basking in the fact that he just took out Dory the Blue Ogre. Brogy stands there proud, tears running down his face. After 73,467 battles, he finally has a single victory. He stares off into the distance, and that's when Mr. 3 decides to make his introduction. He calmly introduces himself and his partner Miss Golden Week. Back with Luffy's group, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine finally show themselves. Luffy immediately understands these are the ones responsible for everything that's been happening. In a pretty rough turn, we also see that they've already captured and beaten Karu. They explain that they plan to use him as bait to draw Vivi out. We get a short flashback of Karu standing his ground and refusing to call for help or give Vivi away. Vivi is immediately furious, and Usopp quickly puts the pieces together too. The two of them launch a counterattack, and while they put up a decent fight, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine come out on top. Mr. 5 tells them that they're only here to capture them under Mr. 3's orders, and that's when Vivi realizes the full picture and says it out loud. Mr. 3, the wax fruit user, is on this island. Mr. 5 confirms it. The man who uses wax as a weapon, the human candle. And that's when we get a cut back to Mr. 3, who has already subdued Brogy. Mr. 5 tells Luffy that Zoro and Nami have already been captured as well, and after some back and forth, and a few insults exchanged, Mr. 5 decides that he's done talking and ends the conversation with an explosion. The blast leaves Usopp, Karu, and Luffy down, while Vivi gets taken away. We cut back to Mr. 3, who's calmly explaining that once his wax hardens, it becomes harder than steel. He looks at Brogy and asks if he still isn't happy, since the battle is over after all. Who cares if he only won because of the outside help? Victory is still victory. You can see the horror hit Brogy the moment that he realized what that means. His century-long fight with Dory meant nothing. Mr. 3 then drops the real reason that he's here. together. He's come to collect the bounties on both of their heads. That's when Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine reunite with him, carrying Vivi. She immediately calls Mr. 3 out for what they did to Dory, and Brogy finally puts everything together. But at this point, it doesn't matter anymore. Mr. 3 puts wax restraints on Vivi and builds a massive candle structure. He places Vivi, Zoro, and Nami up on it. Without getting too deep into the mechanics, the whole point of the setup is to slowly turn the three of them into candles, which puts a hard time limit on any rescue attempt. Brogy is furious and tries to break free, but Mr. 5 shuts him down immediately. Meanwhile, back with Luffy's group, all three of them are battered but still conscious, and just like that, they decide that it's time to launch their counterattack. Mr. 3 is surprised by how much resolve Brogy still has, so he decides to put even more restraints on him. The captured Straw Hats and Brogy can only stare at him in horror, and Mr. 3 is clearly enjoying every second of it. He wants them to sit there in torment while they slowly solidify. That's when Zoro offers a pretty extreme idea. He'll just cut off his own legs. If the enemy is going to fight this dirty, then he's going to make the ugliest, most desperate fight possible. The suggestion earns Brogy's respect almost immediately. Everyone else is shocked, but Vivi actually agrees with him. Just as Zoro is about to go through with it, Luffy, Usopp, and Karu finally arrive and jump into the fight. Nami quickly catches them up on the situation and then notices the blood on Zoro's legs. Turns out that he wasn't bluffing. He was genuinely ready to force his way out by any means necessary. And with that, the stage is set. Luffy, Usopp, and Karu are about to take on Mr. 3, Mr. 5, Miss Valentine, and Miss Golden Week. Now, since this video is just a summary of the arc, I'm not going to be explaining every punch and kick in this fight, but there are a few moments worth pointing out. While everything is going on, Zoro decides to strike a cool pose because he refuses to go out looking like an idiot. It's a small, very Zoro moment. We also finally get a proper look at Miss Golden Week's powers. She uses colors to paint different emotions and states onto people, which leads to Luffy saying and doing some very uncharacteristic things. You know, that's the whole point of her ability. Eventually he breaks out of it, but it creates some memorable chaos in the middle of the battle. As the fight continues, we finally cut over to Sanji, who's been completely absent for this entire arc. He's back at the Going Merry, realizes that something is clearly wrong, and heads out to look for the others. Along the way, he stumbles across the wax house that Mr. 3 had set up earlier. Back at the main fight, things start turning in the Straw Hats' favor. Nami, Zoro, and Vivi get freed from the wax prison and jump into the battle. From there, they're able to make relatively quick work of most of the Baroque Works agents. The long fight is basically over, except Mr. 3 manages to slip away into the jungle. Luffy chases after him and suddenly finds himself surrounded by a whole group of Mr. 3 lookalikes. Mr. 3 taunts him, saying that if Luffy attacks the wrong one, he'll take the opportunity to stab him straight through the heart. Luffy doesn't have time for the mind games though. He figures out which one is the real Mr. 3 off of pure instinct and ends the fight for good. We cut over to Sanji, who's inside of the wax house and clearly enjoying the unexpected comfort of it. Out of nowhere, a Den Mushi starts ringing. Sanji picks it up, with no idea that Mr. Zero is on the other end of the line. During these chapters, we also get a cover page story about what happened to Django after the events of Syrup Village. So if you're interested in taking a look at that, I highly recommend you check it out. Back on Little Garden, Dory actually gets back up. He realizes the reason that neither of them have been able to land a killing blow for 100 years is probably because their weapons are so old and worn down that they can't deliver a true fatal strike anymore. The two giants share a laugh and embrace. Meanwhile, Sanji is still on the phone with Mr. Zero. He immediately recognizes that he's speaking to one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Mr. Zero asks if Mr. 3 has completed the mission, and Sanji quickly puts the pieces together. This is the enemy side, and the man trying to kill Vivi is connected to this island. He decides to play along and reports that the mission was a success. Mr. Zero congratulates who he believes is Mr. 3 and says that the Unluckies are already on their way to confirm the job and deliver an eternal post to Alabasta. He then orders Mr. 3 to head to Alabasta with Miss Golden Week. The most important part of the plan is about to begin. That's when Sanji looks to the side and realizes that the Unluckies have already arrived. While still on the call, he takes them out, but Mr. Zero immediately senses that something is wrong. Sanji tries to cover by claiming one of the Straw Hats turned out to still be alive, but he dealt with him just now. But the excuse only makes Mr. Zero angrier. We get a strange shot of him holding a flower that suddenly wilts, giving the first real hint about what his power might be. Mr. Zero tells him to go straight to Alabasta, and that this will be their last Den Mushi conversation. From now on, orders will be delivered the old-fashioned way. way. He hangs up, looks over at Miss All Sunday, who has been there the whole time, and instructs her to send Mr. 2 to Little Garden. He also orders that somewhere between Little Garden and Alabasta, Mr. 3 is to be disposed of. Back with Sanji, he looks at the defeated Unluckies and spots the Eternal Post to Alabasta lying on the ground. We get a quick cut to somewhere else on the Grand Line where Captain Smoker has intercepted the transmission. Among the words that they catch are Princess Vivi, the Straw Hatch, and Mr. Zero. They've already captured Mr. 11 from Baroque Works. Smoker now understands that Vivi is the missing princess of Alabasta. He's not sure yet how deeply the Straw Hats are involved, but this is the first real lead that they've gotten on their location. Smoker and Tashigi set a course for the Desert Kingdom. Back on Little Garden, Dory and Brogy are bonding with the crew again. Everyone is still worried about how they're gonna leave the island until Sanji finally reunites with them. He fills them in on the call with Mr. Zero and reveals that he found an Eternal Post set to Alabasta. The crew immediately starts celebrating. Sanji then brings up the hunting challenge that he still has going with Zoro, which seems to remind the Giants of something. Luffy tells Dory and Brogy that it's time for the Straw Hats to leave. As the crew heads for the ship, the two Giants look at each other and decide that they can't just stand by while their new friends sail into danger. The Straw Hats board the Going Merry and set sail, with Dory and Brogy standing on the shore ready to help. Almost immediately, a massive sea monster rises from the water, a giant goldfish the size of a sea king. Luffy, being Luffy, decides to sail straight towards its mouth. Dory and Brogy respond with a powerful combined attack called Hakoku Sovereignty, blasting a clean hole straight through the creature and opening a path for the ship to escape. It is an epic send-off, but there's one small detail that I wanted to cover. Usopp takes a look at the giant goldfish and says, you know what, this sounds familiar, and this brings up one of the most important mechanics in all of One Piece. The story of the giant goldfish was one of the lies that he told Kaya back in Syrup Village, and this becomes a running mechanic in the show. Whenever Usopp does tell a lie, there's a high possibility that it will become a fact in the future. So if you are watching the show or if you're reading the manga and you catch Usopp in one of his lies, just know in the back of your head that that's probably going to show up in the future. We get one last look at Dory and Brogy laughing in the distance, followed by a short flashback to how their fight even started. A long time ago, both of them had caught these enormous sea monsters, but a little girl asked, which one is bigger? They dragged their catches onto land to compare, and somehow, somewhere along the way, they completely forgot what they were even arguing about. The volcano erupts again, and just like that, it's time for another round. On the Going Merry, Luffy and Usopp are already talking about how one day they'll visit the land of the Giants. Nami looks exhausted from everything that just happened, and Vivi has a new quiet resolve. She will survive and make it back to Alabasta. We also get one of the first looks at Zoro training while at sea. There's a brief cut to a sandy harbor in Alabasta where we're introduced to Mr. 2, Bon Clay. We don't get much of him yet, but the scene exists mainly to show what he looks like. Finally, back on the ship, Nami says that she needs to rest, and as she walks away, she suddenly collapses, burning up with a fever. And that brings us to the end of the Little Garden arc. Now, what could be happening to Nami? That's a great question. A question for another video. And before you go, don't forget to leave a comment about what you thought about this arc. And lastly, before you go, I do want to leave you with a couple of questions to keep in the back of your mind as we progress through the story of One Piece. Question number 1, who is Mr. 2? Question number 2, what is Mr. Zero's Devil Fruit power? There are a couple of things that I wanted to mention, mainly Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine and Miss Golden Week are completely useless for the rest of the show, so you can go ahead and forget about them, but keep Mr. 3 in the back of your mind. In addition, you can also remember both Dory and Brogy. If you have been enjoying this series and you want to switch over to the manga, you are free to start at chapter 130, and if you're interested in starting the anime, you can start at episode 78. But yeah, I think that's everything that I got for you guys in this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a future upload, and I will see you in the next video. You still here?